This is the Rachel Show, where we talk about all things politics, especially election wrongdoing, media bias, and lawfare. And today I am excited to interview one of my good friends, Ajay Bruno. He's a political consultant and a PR expert. And we have very similar views when it comes to wanting the party, the Republican Party, to be the party of Reagan, like it used to be, instead of all these problems that have happened in recent years. And we're going to go over today six of what we see as some of the biggest problems facing the GOP. AJ describes himself as Reagan aficionado. I describe myself as a William F. Buckley Jr. aficionado. I've started my website Intellectual Conservative after him, and I've just been dismayed to see how torn apart the Republican Party has become, and how we've lost civility and we've lost, what we used to stand for. So let's begin. AJ, I'd like to ask you, what is your assessment of this social media era now, where it seems like clicks drive everything, influencers drive everything, people, we've never heard of are now dictating where the party is going. And these are people who say outrageous things that I believe actually hurt the party. They don't help the party.
Yeah, I don't know how these people get the amount of support that they do. And the whole influencer thing, I think is just the dumbest thing ever. But there must be hordes of people out there who listen to what these randoms say, or else they wouldn't be influencers. If someone's pushing something on me, it makes me not want to go along with that, but maybe that's the minority viewpoint. So yeah, I don't care what especially some random person who supposedly has a large social media following says. And if anyone else gets their news or their opinion from that, I think that says a lot about them. So yeah, that's I think that's a problem nowadays, and I kind of wish we'd go back to before that was a thing. Um, yeah, so the whole social media landscape, I think, is just a mess, and then the people who are involved with pushing that agenda, I yeah, I think you got crazy people like Candace Owens who has millions of followers, and she could say whatever she wants, and some of those people are still going to believe it, and she's still going to make money from them, and I don't understand it, but it is what it is. So. Yeah.
I feel they just have a responsibility to use their power in a good way. I think it's great that people are no longer getting their news from the mainstream media, but if you're going to go to an influencer to get it, shouldn't you be going to a legitimate influencer who isn't being paid to put out crazy conspiracy theories? And I don't mean conspiracy theories like election fraud, because we all know that really is occurring, but they will put out nutty stuff that makes conservatives look nutty, and they're getting paid behind the scenes to do it. And I mean, how do we stop this? I mean, I know Elon Musk community notes has been very helpful because people will add community notes to their posts, but to me, I feel like it's just dividing the GOP. And all the attention seekers, they're the ones who are getting all the clicks instead of legitimate people who want to actually analyze issues and get the truth out.
That seems to be what gets the attention nowadays. So I don't understand it. Yeah. You would think that people who actually have some intellectual heft would get more attention, but I think the way the population is nowadays, nowadays it's been very dumbed down by social media and other nonsense like that. So when people aren't getting their news from like legit news sources, or a lot of these formerly legit news sources are now biased, and then you get it from people on the internet, it's even worse, I think. So that's a big problem. People are not well informed. They're poorly informed and they get information from bad sources. So I think this problem just kind of exacerbates itself the more that happens, and it's just an endless cycle. So that's how I see it. I'd like to know how to change that, but I feel like it's just it's kind of hard to put a spike in that wheel and stop it at this point. But yeah.
I just wish people would take a little more care. Like somebody will send me a screenshot of some, glaring headline, and it doesn't include a link to any article. It's just some blaring headline from some, random, website that's not very reputable. and people don't stop and check it. And I've been a couple times made a mistake where I retweeted one of these things, and it was just sometimes it's like really old news. It'll be like something from 2 years ago and that'll be exaggerated today, and somebody's just posting it to get clicks. To me, it's just noise, and it's hurting the party. And I don't know how we go back to where we used to be.
Mm. Well, people constantly post things that are lies to get clicks, and I don't understand that. Even something stupid. The other day, I saw someone post on some group wishing William Shatner a happy 95th birthday, except his birthday is next March. So he's just making up a lie to get clicks and attention. It's it's verifiably false right away. So if someone lies about something like that, how about something like really serious? So that happens all the time, and a lot of times it's not even caught. I mean, this isn't as malevolent, but there's a speech that supposedly Steve Jobs said before he died, and I saw it posted yesterday, but he didn't actually say it. Somebody made it up and attributed it to him. But people don't verify these things; they just believe it as fact. And people believe gossip, and I don't understand that. To me, it's like I always try to verify something is true, and yeah, that does not seem to be the prevailing wisdom nowadays. I don't understand why, but that's kind of where we've come as a society. And yeah, I wish it wasn't that way, but I don't know how to change it.
So, a second topic I'd like to discuss with you is the amount of rudeness. We all
Mhm.
heard years ago how you have these keyboard warriors hiding behind their computer screens who are willing to say offensive things to somebody online that they would never dare say to their face in person. And it's just gotten out of control. I mean, I get slammed by people on the right every day, even.
Mm. Yeah, there's plenty of things people would say online that they wouldn't say in person. That's true. And have any of these people showed up to your events and said the same thing? I don't think so. So, it's like you have this anonymity and this mask if you're not using your real identity, especially online, to say whatever you want, and there's not really generally any repercussions for it. So I think it's whatever, like maybe they're trolling in some cases, but in other cases, this is like whatever crazy things they're actually thinking and believing, and I think that's disturbing on another level too. But I've seen plenty of hate myself online, and it just comes with the territory. I think you gotta well, depending on who you are, sometimes you got to take it seriously nowadays because there's crazies out there, obviously, and people have been killed or attempted to be killed over some of these things. But I try to just zone out a lot of the crap online, but it's hard because you hear it all the time. So
But why can't we go back to an era of civility? The 1980s, people were polite even to your opposing party. Why are people so rude? Is it because mental illness is everywhere now? I mean, I just don't understand why people have to be so mean about it. At least say it with a sense of humor if you're gonna, slam the left or slam the right.
yeah, no, I think there used to be like a greater degree of respect that doesn't exist now, and you could disagree with someone politically, but you wouldn't hate that person for that, and that's not the case anymore. I think like you mentioned Reagan at the beginning, and I think part of his appeal was he could disarm people who were political opponents through his like charm and humor, and that's not something that really I think exists so much nowadays. And there's maybe some cases where people are friends with those who are on the other side, but much less common now. So I don't know why we moved so far from that level of civility. I thought it was bad during the Bush administration, but it's gotten worse than that. So, you think it can't get more divisive and vitriolic, but it somehow does get that way. And yeah, I don't know. It only seems to get worse. So where it goes from here, yeah, it's we'll see, but it's not looking good. So,
I mean, maybe we need to start a civility movement, I mean, a group, on the right that exists just to promote civility in politics because the loudest, rudest voices are the ones getting all the attention, and then the left loves to just hold them up and say, "Oh, this is what the conservative movement is like now. This is what MAGA is like now." And that's not true. They're ignoring those of us out there who are polite and have manners and want reasonable discourse. I've participated in debates with the left, and I intend to have the left on this show. I don't think there's any reason why we can't at least be civil about it. Can we use their Saul Alinsky tactics? Sure, you can ridicule the left, you can do things like that. But on the other hand, I think some of this, baseless attacks just constantly, it can't be good for people's mental health. But let's move on.
Mhm.
The next topic, the third topic I want to talk about with you is how it seems like today nepotism and money is what is getting people promoted instead of promoting legitimate, smart, conscientious conservatives. And we see the same old talk show hosts on all the shows. We see the same guests on most of the shows. And if you look at a lot of the major conservative conferences, it's always the same loud, obnoxious types, such as influencers who have never accomplished much. So, I mean, what is going on? And how do we fix it? Do you have any ideas, AJ?
Well, a lot of it is who you know and how you look too. So that's two things there that I think some of the people you see speaking, the talking heads, are not necessarily people with any sort of accomplishment or talent or particularly deep
If
insight
you're
to
a young
offer.
hot woman and you've put photos of yourself online in a bikini, well, that's the way to get on all these,
Yeah,
muckety muck shows and conferences.
that gets you on a lot of these shows. So it's yeah, it doesn't make any sense. You think they could find attractive people who actually have some more important things to say and maybe are more qualified to say them. But yeah, that seems to be the trend now. I don't know how we got to this, but there's a big problem with nepotism and everything nowadays. I mean, especially if you have a close connection for that. I mean, it goes both ways. There's people who get important jobs based on who they're related to or who they know, and I think it's. I mean, like I think everyone should be judged on the merits, and it shouldn't matter who you're related to, or your gender, or your skin color. None of this stuff should matter, and it goes both ways because I think there is this going on with in various political ideologies. So I don't think it's too much to ask that you just pick the best person on merit. But that's in a lot of situations not realistic because people use their bias and they're able to justify that bias. And yeah, I don't know. I'd like a system that's merit based, and we don't really have that so much anymore. And I was watching Death by Lightning on Netflix. You've been seeing it. It's pretty good. And but one of the things that during that period that like Garfield wanted to change was people were essentially given positions as political rewards and favors, and it was all a corrupt system based on cronyism. And in a lot of ways, I feel like we have that nowadays, and we shouldn't. So yeah.
I always like to point out that there is a conservative network that is known for hiring young, hot women that say ridiculous things. And
Mhm.
then that's how they get on. And then they predictably all eventually get fired from this network because they continue to say outrageous things and there's an outcry. Like how, but
Mhm.
they hire like the attention seekers. They hire the narcissists. And so you're gonna get a scandal. And then the left's able to just look and say, oh, you conservatives are all crazy and loud and rude and they don't represent the rest of us. But these networks, they never learn. They just keep doing
Mhm.
it. And again, this show today, AJ, it seems like it's more about questions than answers. And maybe we'll have to have you back and discuss some
Mhm.
solutions because I mean, I don't have all the answers either. I've been in media forever and I don't know how to fix it. Okay, so moving on to the fourth issue, which is attacking and nitpicking leading conservatives constantly who are actually accomplishing good, such as attacking them for not going after election fraud and Democrats harder than they are. I mean, our side, we're just eating each other up with these unfair, unjust nitpicking.
Mhm. Uh, well, I mean, I was mad about election fraud long before most of those people. Like I said, the 2004 Washington governor's race, election fraud. You'll never convince me the Democrat won that race. It was BS. And I'm still mad about it all these years later. So there's been a lot of cheating going on for a long time. But I think at a certain point, people need to, move on. It's kind of like, mm, uh, if you have more in common with someone and you're there's issues you want to achieve together, I think dwelling on stuff from years ago doesn't make any sense. So, yeah, I think there's still some divisiveness over the whole electoral fraud topic, and but at this point, it's like I think just secure the elections for the future and stuff that happened before. You can't go back and change who came in after the 2020 election, like unless you have a time machine, it's not possible. So. I think you just move forward from here, try to stop any fraud from occurring in the future, period. And hopefully everybody can get together on supporting that. And yeah, so I think that's pretty common sense. And but look, there's lots of places that don't believe in secure elections. Like they passed that law in California, which makes it illegal to ask for ID. And they said that they made it seem like it was hard for certain groups to get ID. It's not that hard to get a form of identification, and if you're a citizen and you don't have it, that doesn't make any sense. So I think the only reason really is that they want people to vote fraudulently, because what other possible reason would you want that on the books? But yeah, so I think that's a big problem.
Common sense. And, I'm going to make 2 points.
Mhm.
So, first of all, we had somebody here in Maricopa County, and there's a lot of people like this who we would say his method was, I may agree with you on 99% of the issues, but I will bash you to no end on the 1% that we disagree on. And as you know, AJ, that violates Reagan's 11th commandment,
Mhm.
which is not to criticize other conservatives. Now, I will put a caveat in there. I don't believe that his 11th commandment applied to RINOs. My hero being William F. Buckley Jr., he would go after the RINOs and he would attack them because that they don't act like Republicans. So, you can criticize somebody who is acting like a Democrat. That's fair game. But when it comes to somebody who's got, like, say, a 95% lifetime rating from the American Conservative Union as a politician, that's very respectable. That's not somebody that you should be picking apart. That is somebody who, might be from a swing district and they're doing all they can to get reelected because otherwise it could be a Democrat getting elected. So I just feel like we're holding people up to this standard that's impossible. Like you don't understand the 5% of the legislation that this person voted the way you didn't think they should vote. There's so many things going on behind the scenes. You have to compromise with Democrats on some things to get anything passed. And now, should it be a very small amount? Yes. But once they get to a certain level where it's clear there's a rhino, then they're fair game. I'm part of the rhino removal project. We go after those Republicans who act like Democrats. But, attacking people for, oh, gee, you didn't prosecute someone over election fraud, immediately, when we all know if you try to prosecute someone over election fraud, they're going to turn around, they're going to disbar you, and they're going to bring prosecution charges against you. So it has to be done very carefully and very methodically because the judges are all going to rule against you. So I don't know. I mean, again, do we have any solutions for this? These loudmouths who attack you over the 1% of what is usually just tactical disagreements, in my opinion.
To me, the logical solution would be to ignore them, but the problem is people feed into their attention to give them more attention. So that amplifies those voices. So that would be my suggestion, but people actually have to follow that and stop giving them the attention that they're seeking. So I think that would be the way to solve it. And yeah, no, that's true. You tend to focus on the couple of things that you disagree with and all that. But I think. I would make one caveat with that. I think that there are some people within the who call themselves Republicans that I think have gone along with certain far left elements of the Democratic agenda. For example, when the Democrats passed that so-called Respect for Marriage Act, any Republican who voted for that should have been immediately primaried and thrown out. We don't need far left extremist views seeping into Republican politics, and I think that's been a disturbing trend that this is basically accepted. I mean, we get somebody who's like the basically the leading candidate for Republican governor in New York who supports that. And people are raving about her. Well, that's one issue, but it's a big issue because she supports a Democratic agenda to undermine, um, I think, a fabric of our Judeo-Christian society. So I take issue with people who go along with things like that. But when we're talking about, these other topics, these things that I don't think are as fundamentally societally moral issues. We're talking about voter fraud and that kind of thing. I think there's a different standard here. But I do think we need to focus more on, in terms of rhinos, people who actually want to rewrite certain things about what it means to be a Republican and who have actually actively worked with Democrats against values that we're supposed to believe in as conservatives. And that makes me mad that a lot of people seem to don't care, just ignore that. And I don't do that. So, yeah.
Well, and you can't even get Republicans to agree on the most basic, tenets of the Republican Party, like economics, lower taxes, less regulations, less spending. You've got the rhinos that can't even agree on that. Like, I think it's out of control. A member of Congress told me that he was absolutely disgusted when he hears his fellow members of Congress talk all conservative, but behind the scenes, they're voting with the Democrats. They're just a bunch of hypocrites, and we're gonna get to that point last. But let me move on to the fifth point, which is what about this new thing that's popped up since 2020, where a lot of Republicans are now pretending that the reason good MAGA, good conservative candidates are losing is because they were bad candidates instead of the fact that they were targeted by election fraud. One of the key races ever, there were two races, was Carrie Lake's race for governor and then for U.S. Senate here in Arizona. Everybody knows that she lost due to election fraud. I've got an article out there which shows how I believe 60,000 votes were flipped, probably using machines, from her to the unknown Green Party candidate, something that's been happening for years, I believe, flipping votes from Republicans to the Green Party candidate. And so we're basically destroying our best and brightest conservative candidates by allowing the left to get away with this election fraud and blaming it on them being bad candidates. Like here in Arizona, they're already talking about how Andy Biggs is going to lose because he's too conservative, when we all know if he actually loses, it's going to be because of election fraud. Kerry supposedly lost her U.S. Senate race last fall. So the election fraud issue has not been completely fixed in Arizona yet.
Mm.
So how do we turn things around so we aren't destroying our best conservative candidates with this ruse? And AJ, what annoys me is because these big networks are so scared of being sued over talking about election fraud that they won't even allow Republican political consultants, people like me, on to discuss why Republicans lost. Like if you look at the mayoral race in Miami, where a Democrat surprisingly won, nobody's talking about election fraud. Everybody's just saying, "Oh, it could have been this or demographics or the," but they don't want to. There's been no discussion of it. It's just swept under the rug.
Um, yeah, the Miami race, that was a surprising one because I think it was like an 18% margin or something. And Republicans have held that mayor seat for something like 28 years. So I don't know the reasons. I'd have to dig into the numbers and all that. But yeah, that was a disturbing one, especially given the fact that, I mean, Florida is not a swing state anymore. It's a very red state. So it's really switched quite a bit. So even Miami-Dade County is Republican, which also never used to be the case. So it's changed a lot, but um, I don't know. Maybe they're bringing in illegal voters. I don't know what's going on there. So I'd have to have to dig into that more. Um, and yeah, as for candidates, it depends. The one you mentioned is going to not be the candidate though, because your friend David's going to get the nomination. So don't worry about that, and then he'll win. So no
Wait,
worries.
wait, 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 wait. We
Um,
got to talk here. Now, why do you think David Schweikert's going to win the gubernatorial primary over Andy Biggs here?
His judgment can't possibly be as bad as Andy, so we've talked about this, but yeah, I don't know who's going to actually win. I hope he does, but often the better candidate doesn't win. But again, you're the expert in Arizona politics, and I know it's tough for you having to balance that and your friendship with Mark and Katie, and I know it's very difficult, but
No, no, no. You're not getting away with that
I'll
one,
leave the
man.
I'll,
Those aren't my
I'll
friends.
leave the
You can
expert
have them for
analysis.
friends.
Yeah. But no, seriously. So yeah, I think I think it's important to secure elections. I'm not, like I said, I'm not all the way there with you on some of these things, but I do care about fraud, and um, I think we need to prevent it however that's possible. So yeah, more steps need to be taken in that area. And yeah, and then like I said there have been cases where especially the Democrats have cheated. I mentioned that one governor's race, which they for sure cheated, and it was close enough that they could have cheated. So
Well,
I believe this stuff has happened.
and you
Um,
have in your own Patterson, New Jersey. I mean, they've actually been prosecuted for that. Was it the city council race? The Democrats were cheating in that race. Like, you're familiar with that?
yeah, that has happened here too. Yeah, I mean, but you talk about voter, I mean, that makes me wonder also because the polling here, and I don't know as much about in Patterson, but the governor's race here, everyone said that, because last time the polls were actually a little tighter than the result was tighter than the polls suggested. This time the Democrat won by more than the polls were suggesting. So, but it makes you wonder, like, did she really win by 14%? It was a real shock because I thought it'd at least be close. But or people just that dumb? I don't know, that ignorant. Sometimes
No, it's
oh, I think the
obviously
opposite.
voter fraud. You know, New Jersey
Yeah.
is considered one of the most corrupt states.
Yeah.
So, you know, a lot of these blue states, I always remember one of the top election integrity experts in California told me that after her years of investigation, she figured out that California was almost exactly the same split between Republicans and Democrats, but they've just
Yeah.
been doing the voter fraud so well for so long that people have this perception that California is actually really blue. And I believe the same with New Jersey. I mean, didn't it come pretty close for Trump last year, if I remember correctly?
It was yeah within 6%, I think. So yeah, by the standards of that is close for. It was like on par with Virginia, which unfortunately is no longer a red state, but still it came closer than you would expect. So uh, yeah, it's it just makes me think if the result was real, how just wondering how stupid people could be because you've had 8 years of one party rule where things have become more unaffordable and mm, to the point where lots of people I think, would leave based on that. And then you elect someone who I think is even worse than the current governor to give them another 4+ years of a monopoly. It makes no sense. There's no logic to it. And politics is supposed to be local. So if they're actually voting based on Trump or whatever, they're just stupid because it makes no sense. So that was a very disappointing one. But yeah.
Okay, so I will finish up with my sixth issue I wanted to bring up with
Mhm.
you, which is follow the money, how rhinos are paid off. And everybody, you know, we all used to look at John McCain and he would just say, "Oh, I'm all about straight talk and da 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 da." But we all know with him it was follow the money. And so,
Mhm.
you know, this is yet another problem that's dividing the party. This is why rhinos are rhinos. They get up there and they're like, well, I'm just not into conspiracy theories and I'm voting with my conscience and I'm doing what's right. And they use all the emotional talking points of the left. But the reality is we're finally able to dig into their finances and people are starting to do investigative research and we find out it all comes down to money. So I don't know, you know, what you think we can do about this, AJ, or how much you have seen this. But in my experience as an investigative reporter researching all these rhinos, it always is follow the money.
I think in general, money is too tied into our politics. To run a campaign, you need massive amounts of it, and you need to raise massive amounts of money. And in other countries, it wouldn't be as extreme. So I think that's a problem. We don't want that to be correlated to that. And but again, I think people, like people complain about negative campaign ads. If they didn't work, they wouldn't run them. So that's why for an election, you see nonstop negative ads. Clearly, people really want to see them, even if they say they don't. So I think all the money that gets fed into politics just makes it more corrupt. And we have a system that I think uh, even if someone's a billionaire only goes so far because I think it's practically impossible to make a third party. It's you have this two-party entrenchment. Um, and in a lot of ways, I think it might be better if we had more of that, or like Washington wanted not to have parties at all, because I think money has really corrupted politics, and in modern day times, even more so. But we're so far down that rabbit hole, I don't know how we get out of it, but that's kind of the situation as I see it.
And the way the founders set up this country, you were supposed to go and serve 1 or 2 terms, and that would be
Mhm.
it. You weren't supposed to make this into a full-time living. And I just saw a post the other day about how Ilhan Omar, was worth, I don't know, something like $100,000, and now she's worth like $3 million. So they're going in and they're becoming wealthy off of this, and this isn't what the system was designed to be. And even Elon Musk, when he said he was going to start a third party, the America Party, if anybody could do it, it would be the richest man on earth, right? He couldn't even do it. He never went through. I mean, it kind of exists as a shell, but he's not doing anything with it. I just see posts from America on X. That's pretty much about
Mhm.
it. So I don't know, why our nation can't convert to multiple parties like Europe, but on the other hand, are they much better off? I mean, in some ways, I don't know if that system is even better. Like, I left the Republican Party years ago because I was so disgusted with the RINOs, became a libertarian for a couple years, but they weren't any better. I didn't like them on social issues. And I feel like in recent years, especially with Trump coming in, I feel like the Republican Party has taken a turn back for the better. I feel like we have gotten a little more back to our principles, but we're still not there. We're still a mess. And, the one thing that I really hate, AJ, is how you'll have a perfectly good Republican conservative running for office, and some idiot will jump in, and that person will force the good conservative to waste all their money in the primary. Meanwhile, the Democrats have all, rallied around one candidate, so they're saving their money for the general. So by the time we get to the general, there's no money left. And so I just feel like there's just too many people who are narcissists. They're connected. They've got independent funding, which usually, I mean, that can definitely be a really good thing because then you're not under the influence. But, here in Arizona, we've got Rhino Karen Taylor Robson using her husband's millions and millions of dollars. And that's not a good thing because she's just going to stir up Arizona's primary, force Schweikert and Biggs to spend all the money against her. And meanwhile, Katie Hobbs, the only Democrat running, and so the Democrats are going to have all their money for the general election.
Yeah, yeah, I think that can also be a destructive thing. At the same time, though, on the flip side of that, sometimes you have these party bosses who very aggressively push a certain candidate, and they want the path cleared for that person. I think that could be a negative thing too. And one example of that
True.
be last year in Pennsylvania. There's only one candidate running, and again, kind of a rhino on some social issues, but no one else ran, and then they just funneled all this money into that one candidate, and somebody else could have run, but would they have had a realistic chance? We have all the party machinery lining up behind one person. Not really. And so I think that's a problem. I also am not crazy about when you have some of the party bigwigs endorsing in primaries. I think that sends a bad sign. I think it's important for the people to pick their candidate. But like you said, if you're spending all your money against each other, that's also an issue. So I think it's a balance between that and yeah. So the question is, how do you find a balance there? Um, but yeah, I don't know. They gotta work that out there. And but I think it's important to pick the most principled conservative candidate, and that's not always done, but hopefully, hopefully
Well,
it people make it a priority without having to, I guess, do too much damage before a general election.
Well, you bring up some really good points. The reason people get annoyed with the party bosses picking and choosing in the primaries is because they'll pick the rhino. If they would just pick the conservative, then there wouldn't be any issues. But I will say this, here in Arizona, we have someone who is absolutely wonderful, one of my favorite, smartest activists in Arizona. And they are going behind the scenes and they are trying to clear the field, getting involved behind the scenes in
Mm.
primaries, saying, okay, look, we already have this really good candidate. This is not a good race for you to run in. So maybe that's how it should be done. Use Arizona as a model there. This person has been pretty effective at a lot of the races, maybe not, the big ones like the governor's race, but I think they're doing absolutely invaluable work. So, that being said, AJ, I mean, do you have any, final thoughts on, how we can get rid of some of this infighting? I mean, should people get more active on social media? Should they become citizen journalists and write about it? Should they get involved in their, local Republican Party? I mean, what would you recommend that people do?
Well, I think it's important that people take back the power for themselves. And I don't think anyone should ever be beholden to someone, just because maybe someone who's seen as a party leader or who's risen to that point says certain things doesn't mean you have to go along with whatever they say, especially if it's something that you don't agree with. So I think it's important to stick to your principles and be outspoken about it and be active about it. And I think we shouldn't compromise on those types of values, and people who are involved in politics shouldn't compromise on that. So that I think is important. Yeah, whether it's like being a journalist or a citizen journalist or using social media for positive things, which is less common nowadays. But yeah, or just getting involved in different campaigns or party politics locally or otherwise. I think that's all important. And I think the more that's done, and the more that's done in kind of a genuine way for the right reasons. And one last thing I think you mentioned before. Yeah, too many of these people that we reelect for terms on end. And it's supposed to be public service, not self-service. I'm in the district I'm in now has a Republican congressman who was elected in 1980. It's like almost the only job this guy has had. And they'll probably send him back to office again. Whenever there's a primary, no one can beat him, even when the Democrats gerrymandered the district. Nobody should be in one office for almost half a century. It's ridiculous. So I think we need to have a situation where people get into politics for public service. You do a certain amount of terms in whatever office, and then you leave, not just stay and kind of reap the benefits and in a lot of cases get rich off it. I think that has to change, and that has corrupted the system, and something's got to be done about it.
I kind of lean towards that too. All right, that will do it. Thanks so much, AJ, for coming on my show today. Thanks everybody for watching.
Anytime.